Good evening, everyone. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Tonight is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, June 2010. Let me turn it over to our clerk for consideration of applications. We have two non-routine applications and then a series of routine applications that do require some explanation. So we'll be going through a few of those just to make sure that those who are listening to the Wizard and his TV station will get the benefit of understanding what it is that the BET has been doing over the past month in terms of reviewing these transfer items or carry forward items. So with that, Mr. Clerk, Joe Pellegrino, if you can, I'm sorry, Mr. Mason, our Chair of the Budget Committee, if you can give us the non-routine applications.
Good evening, everyone. First item is NW1 for the year 2011. It is a transfer of regular salaries of $347,000, and I so move the item.
It's been moved by Mr. Mason, second by Mr. Simon. Discussion. Mr. Mason?
I believe you're going to have Mr. Campbell tonight.
Could I?
Mr. Campbell, Chair of our HR Committee.
Mr. Chairman, on June 15th, the HR Committee met. Ray Augustine and Alan Brown of Nathaniel Witherell presented to our committee the Nathaniel Witherell's request for a transfer of $347,000 from the salary adjustment account to regular salaries to allow for the filling of 4 nursing positions and 1 laundry worker position. Maureen Cast, our HR director, noted that the nursing positions were shown on the vacancy report in past months in error, and that these positions were already being in the process of being filled when they were erroneously classified for the first time as vacant with no intent to fill. Mr. Brown gave an overview of the housekeeping and laundry department staffing and scheduling and emphasized that the additional laundry position being requested would remove the current practice of employing part-time employees beyond the recommended maximum of 20 hours a week to fill the required shifts. Mr. Brown also emphasized that the total number of laundry worker hours would not be increased by the proposed new hire and that the effect would be an equal reduction in the number of part-time hours currently scheduled. After discussion, the HR Committee voted 4-0 to approve the requested transfer of funds for both the nursing and laundry positions.
Mr. Mason, our Chair of the Budget Committee.
The Budget Committee did take up this item with little to add to the HR Committee report. Our vote was 4-0 in favor of this also.
I think it's worthy to note at this time that these positions, although described by our HR Chair and Budget Chair as maybe an issue with reporting and appropriate reporting on our list, it's important that the public be aware that the BET, as promised to the RTM, is reviewing each and every one of the 17 positions that, at least at the time that the Budget Committee was reviewing the upcoming fiscal year's budget, that we would review those positions and then report back and give it, I would say, an additional level of scrutiny in terms of the filling of the positions. These are the two, this one and the next application are just 2 of those 17. Last month we approved a permanent part-time position in the clerk's office. And so each and every one of these, to the extent that the department's request that they be filled, will go before the BET, will be presented, and each one of them, as a matter of practice, will be listed as a non-routine item. And so let me thank first Nathaniel Witherell for coming tonight in case there are any questions relative to this application. But I think it's important to note to the public, while there might not be a high level of discussion here tonight, these types of positions have been vetted by our Budget Committee, by our HR Committee, and before that, the appointing authority, in this case, Nathaniel Witherell, and through the Office of the First Selectman. And so it's anticipated that we'll be receiving more of these applications in the hopes that obviously some don't come before us, and the goal is to keep our operating expenses down. And so with that, let me open it up for any further discussions on these particular items. Okay. Hearing none then, application NW1. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. 11-0-0. I guess it's also important to note at this time that Nancy Barton is away and is not attending. We wish her Godspeed and best travels. Item 2 now comes before us. Mr. Mason.
Mr. Chairman, PW 16, Public Works. This is a transfer of salaries for $53,431, and I so move the item on behalf of the Budget Committee.
Moved by Mr. Mason, second by Mr. Simon. Discussion? Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Chairman, again, the HR Committee met on June 15th and took up this item. HR Director Maureen Cass presented to the HR Committee this proposed DPW transfer of $53,431 from the salary adjustment account to salaries for the position of one lead painter. The Town Administrator, John Crary, explained that this request was also due to an error in the vacancy report. In February 2009, one painter position was eliminated from payroll, leaving a total of 4 remaining painters. At that time, the lead painter position remained to be filled through a promotion, with the understanding that there would be no backfilling of the promoted employee's then vacated position. This transfer is to effect the filling of the lead painter position and will not result in any increase in headcount. The HR Committee voted 4-0 to approve the requested transfer of funds.
Mr. Mason.
And adding that, the Budget Committee did also take up this item, and our vote was 4-0 in favor, in addition to the HR Committee.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. 11-0-0. The routine applications now come before us. Mr. Pellegrino, our clerk.
Mr. Chairman, the first one is NW1, Nathaniel Witherell requests the transfer of $270,000 to the prescription drugs, food, and custodial and household supplies account. So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr.
You're not going to
Pellegrino.
read all of them at once?
Yeah, we'll just go through
I
them.
will. Second one is PR6, Parks and Recreation Department requests capital carry forward of $56,000 for playground update program. PR7, Parks and Recreation requests a capital carry forward of $10,000 for the solar-powered refuse containers account. PR8, Parks and Recreation requests a capital carry forward of $100,000 for the replacement of the harbor ferry boat. PR9, Parks and Recreation requests a transfer of $86,512 to the Maintenance, Boats, and Marina account. PW6, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $500,000 to the Holly Hill Master Plan account. PW7, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $350,000 to the town-wide restrooms account. PW8, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $300,000 to the town-wide restrooms accounts. PW9, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $770,000 for the Old Greenwich Force Main. PW10, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $1,500,000 for the Coscob Power Plant. PW11, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $50,000 for the recycling area paving account. PW12, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $50,000 for the Grass Island Grit Screw. PW13, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $490,000 for pump upgrades. PW14, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $100,000 for town hall space utilization. And PW15, Public Works requests a capital carry forward of $500,000 for drainage.
Why don't we do all of the, do the last one as well? and then
Okay.
We'll separate them out in our discussion.
Sure. The last one is FI1, BET Administration. This is a request to transfer $550,000 to the workers' compensation and unemployment accounts.
Moved by Mr. Pellegrino. Second by Mr. Mason. Discussion, Mr. Mason.
This is a interesting time of the year, June, for the Board of Estimate and Taxation. The town charter requires that when an appropriation is made for a capital project, that it needs to be committed in the fiscal year for the appropriation. If there's not a commitment, the BET has the authority under the charter to continue an appropriation in force for an additional year. And what you're seeing here, as I'll run through some of the items to give you some highlights on some of these. The first item is a transfer. Although we're closing out or carrying forward capital items, this is one of the departments of the town, Nathaniel Witherell, is coming to transfer funds within their own budget to end the fiscal year, and I believe they've done that, and finance has done that, so that's what that item's about. You'll see some of the other items as we go. Capital, the playground update program. Well, the Parks and Recs Department does all the playground inspections for the town. This year, school's running till July. They usually do the inspections right after school gets out, do any work they need to do over the summer, but school's not getting out till almost July 1st, so they wanted to continue that and forward. The ferry boat for the money for the $100,000, that's to continue working on a design, trying to find a pre-engineered hull to replace one of our ferry boats. The next item is, again, a transfer to cover work needs to be done on the Island Beach ferry boat as per the Coast Guard inspection. The Holly Hill Master Plan, it's a very involved process. It'll completely change how we operate at Holly Hill between the town site, the recycling, the composting. So that's been a plan that they've been working on for a while. They've had, obviously, the police department that they've had to finish, the Glenville Firehouse. They're getting to that, so they've asked to continue that forward. The townwide restroom is a really interesting one. That dates back, the project on that began about 7 or 8 years ago, and we've got 2 left to do. One is the Grass Island, but that's part of the building replacement that we're doing there, and the other one is, I believe, at Todd's Point, which is involved with a septic field. They've had to wait to get permits to put that in. So, again, the Public Works is asked to continue those and forward, and they should get to them in the next fiscal year. The Coscott Power Plant carry forward, very interesting one. That's a $1.5 million appropriation. We're ready to go, and there's I believe it's 800, Mr. Minarski maybe could correct me if I'm wrong. I think after we do that, we'll be filing for a reimbursement of about $800,000 on that one. And then as you go, you'll see there's the drainage project, the pump grades, the town hall utilization, the space utilization. If you go out in the hallway, you're starting to see them start that now. But again, the departments want to continue it in force in case they don't finish it by the end of the year. And the last one is a BET administration transfer, and that's for the increased workers' comp and unemployment insurance. So we have to go into our own budget in fixed charges and do a transfer to be able to cover that for the end of the year closeout. So with that, it is a very busy time of the year for the BET as far as this is demonstrating to us our ability to do projects. Obviously, we always talk about appropriating the projects, but this has as much to do with is how fast we can get them done, and we're hearing that. So I think moving forward, the departments closed out this year. I think we closed out at our budget committee meeting the tune of about $5.5 million. So that affects our capital model moving forward. So, and some of that money reverts back to the parking fund. Some of it reverts back to capital non-recurring for future capital appropriations. So it was a very busy month. And with that, thank you.
Further discussion on these items? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 11-0-0. Item 3 now comes before us, the assessor's report. Here today is the assessor, Ted Gortney, the assistant assessor, Bob Schmidt. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. You have my report, and I'm prepared to answer any questions. There are 2 new charts that I made up for this evening's meeting on the last 2 pages of the report. The first one is a portrayal of residential real estate sales from 2005 through 2010, showing the median selling prices of all the sales that went through the Greenwich multiple listing service. And you can see how the values trended up after 2005 into 2006 and 7, and then after that they started trending down to where we are today. At this point, the average selling price going through the multiple listing service, not the average, but the median, is 1.6 million. And that last bar, the yellow chart, shows the the average or the median listed price of properties. There are currently 696 sales or listings pending. And the last chart was just a summary of all of our existing Superior Court cases. I thought it would be interesting to simply show them all to you. You can see the amount of assessed value that is being defended and gives you some idea of what's remaining before us. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have on my report.
Questions for the assessor? Maybe some of this will be covered in the assessment revaluation, team. But if you can give a couple-minute status of the progress that's being made and whether any issues have developed. I know you spoke before the Riverside Association, I believe. And so any issues that are before you now that weren't last month or other issues that the BET should be aware of?
The revaluation project is on target for being completed this year. Of particular concern was ensuring that we straightened out any possible inequity between the houses that are selling at the highest prices compared to those selling at the lowest prices. And we have worked on that quite a bit during the last month. And we did a sales analysis that's showing great improvement in comparison to just the prior values that we had. We showed a comparison with what is existing and then what's been done with the revaluation, and I'm glad to report that it's a remarkable change. We'll be meeting with our revaluation BET study group next week, and we'll go over some of those numbers then.
What was the reaction at the Riverside Association relative to your presentation? Did any questions come up that either struck you as being different from prior years or ones that we should be focusing on as a board?
There were no unusual questions. One suggestion was made, and I've decided to act on it, and that is that it would be good to have a general public meeting where anyone can come, and we've arranged to have a meeting in the Greenwich Library in September that would be open to the public generally, because not everyone is a member of a local community homeowners association. The other questions I think were quite good. They're all very logical. Everyone is interested in knowing what's happening in the market and whether or not we're going to be reflecting the market trends, and we were able to respond in a positive way.
Mr. Kelly.
Ted, I just want to compliment you for going forward and doing this and following through.
Further questions, Mr. Simon?
Yeah. This is regard to the meeting that you're planning to hold on September 16th, which is like 2 weeks before the fiscal year end period for the assessment. I would think the meeting would be of more value being held either right before or right after the informal notices go out. I think people will have, we will know no more information when the grand list is complete and the whole revaluation process is finished. We will be able to give more information as to what neighborhoods went up, what happened to residential, what happened to commercial, and I think it would be much more informative and fact-filled in November than it would be in September.
It would be very easy to make that change, and I'll look into doing that.
I mean, I think, I'm not sure what the associations get from the meeting, but I think something that actually shows the results would be much more interesting, probably more widely attended.
In 2005, I think our best meetings were in November, because at that point we were explaining everything that had happened, and we were telling people that they could go for an informal hearing in December.
Right.
So I'll take your advice on this.
My suggestion.
Further comments or suggestions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? Oh, Ms. Starkington?
No, I was going to move that we approve the assessor's report.
I have one other question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So on the top of page 3, is this the final number for the tax credits, senior credit?
Yes.
So the word estimate is not, this is the number. This is
It is the number. The reason that I leave estimate in is that people pass on during the year. Some corrections need to be made. So there's never an exact number because there's always some changes that go on during the year after the deadline's all over.
As of today, this is the number.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Further questions before I turn it over to Ms. Tarkington? Ms. Tarkington, is there a motion to approve the assessor's report?
I so move that, we move the assessors report.
Moved by Ms. Tarkington, second by Mr. Pellegrino. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. 11-0-0. Thank you. Item 4 now comes before us, BET Committee and Special Project Team Reports. Before we jump in for questions from the BET, I have asked for the Nathaniel Witherell Town Building Committee BET representative to just give a brief overview of his report, because I think it's an important report, not only this month, but all months, but once again, to keep us informed as to the status of Nathaniel Witherell. So, Mr. Pellegrino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members of the board, last month, we did have some comments and discussion about Nathaniel Witherell Building Committee, specifically the sentiment of, given the gap of where we were on the con at the time, that we should be essentially very prudent in terms of how we managed our appropriation and how money was spent. I'd like to report back to the board that the sentiment and comments from last month's meeting were fully and fairly described to the building committee. The building committee did have a very healthy, engaged discussion. I think in all fairness, there's no doubt that the committee has been diligent and thoughtful in every dollar that has been spent to date. And in light of that discussion, we questioned what money and appropriations would be spent going forward. I think the sentiment was clearly keep moving the permit process along. There's really very little cost to us to do that. And in terms of construction design drawings, it was articulated and very clearly discussed by the co-chairmans, both Mr. Fox and Mr. Toretta, that it was important to get to 80% of completion on the construction drawings in order to have a valuable product. In other words, in order to really get our money's worth. So we're proceeding down that road, but we're also proceeding carefully and cautiously in terms of how monies are being spent. I think that's the essence of the report that I would give from the building committee back to our board here.
Further questions or comments on first Nathaniel Witherell, whether it's the building committee or otherwise? If not, then questions or comments on any other of the reports, and you should have in your packet the investment committee report, the audit committee report, human resources committee report, and the revaluation team report. Mr. Simon.
I have two comments. We're going to circulate the defined benefit plan RFP for comments this week, for people to get the comments back to you next week. What's the timetable on the RFP for the defined contribution plan?
They met at the BET subcommittee meeting, I think it was last week. There was some comments from Mr. Huffman and Mr. Pellegrino, and Mr. Lavin and I have incorporated them. And we're going to get your comments from about a month ago and incorporate them and send them back to, it was just going to be the subcommittee. I think you're asking, do you want to have it go to the full BET?
I didn't. I was really being pretty selfish. I want to make sure that I get a chance to read what you rewrote to see that all my comments were met.
You will get.
Other people want to view it, that's all right, too.
We'll expand the distribution to include you, Mr. Simon.
That's one comment. Two,
Can I just follow up that one? I'm sorry, are we talking about defined contribution plans
yes.
rather than
This
defined
is-
benefit, which the memo says?
This is, the incumbent is Diversified Investment Advisors.
Right.
This is for the defined benefit plan, and it's for the defined contribution plan also, and it's also for the 403, 457, and the 401k deferred savings plans. So it's a combination of 4 different parts.
Thank you.
Just so the public understands the greater context of this, one of the goals of this board has been to put on a more regular basis a review of our contractors, whether it be every 5 years or 3 years or whatever the industry standard is. And this is one area that we noticed that we should go back for an RFP, go back out to the market. And it's not a reflection of the individuals who are performing these services for us, but simply to make sure that the town is getting the most bang for its buck. And so we've done this with this in this arena. We've previously gone out with our insurance, and there is a host of others that now we hope are on a more routine review, so that the market plays and assists the town in getting a fair and efficient price. So I think we're moving in that direction.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Norton.
may I just make one clarification relating to Ms. Tarkington's comments? Actually, this is an administrative services contract, which includes the host of items that were identified.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Simon, you had said you had.
So my second one is on the audit committee. I'd like to request that in July we take a vote on the telephone system subject to release. I saw in the second page, in the end of the second paragraph of the audit committee, that says no vote was taken. But, you know, we've discussed this. I think there's some issues. I'd like to make sure that this actually leaves the audit committee and comes to the BET in July.
My understanding is that will occur. There's been already some offline discussions about moving that process forward.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments on any of the reports? Mr. Norton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and on the Audit Committee report, for the last couple of months, the Audit Committee has been working with the Special Projects Manager, Ron Lally, to attempt to retrieve and procure driving records for all town employees who have authorization to drive motor vehicles. We have been successful in getting the records for the state of Connecticut drivers and their licenses, and has disclosed to us some unfortunate information in which we found 2 individuals who are required to maintain CDL license, which is commercial driver's license, had a license under suspension. We have been unable to retrieve the same information from the state of New York because the state of New York requires that they be indemnified before they will transmit, which will be done electronically, the information. At the Audit Committee, we heard a discussion presented by the Law Department, specifically Attorney Ahmad, and who indicated to us what the issues were in retrieving from the state of New York motor vehicle driving records, and they will not do it without, as I say, a waiver of indemnification. She also pointed out to us that the first selectman can sign an indemnity waiver. Now, actually, it's Section 30 of the Charter, which is what requires indemnification where there's no specific appropriation for this. And the Audit Committee was concerned about this because she continued to she formally indicated that the first selectman or the selectman's office could sign an indemnity waiver, which in effect would overrule the Section 30 of the Charter. And the Audit Committee wanted to bring this to the attention of the full BET.
Mr. Norton, thank you for your report and the written report in the Audit Committee. I think this matter should be reviewed for both the cost of any type of insurance, the cyber insurance that you're referencing, and also just whether or not the action that I think you're asking the BET to take is in keeping with the charter. And so I think the most appropriate place for this to go at this point would be to go to the Law Committee for a vote, for them to review it over the next month, and then to report back in July. And I think we would have a much more fuller picture, one on the cost, that I'd ask for the Law Committee to follow up with not only the cost of such an insurance, but whether or not we can do this, and if this is whether their recommendation is to do this or not. Because clearly the Audit Committee thinks it's a worthwhile venture. So I'd ask that we take the month to analyze this through our law committee and then bring it back as sort of a, if the law committee's on board, a sort of joint submission between the audit and the law committee for our vote in July with a firm resolution.
The next audit committee meeting is scheduled for the 15th of July.
Okay.
The next law committee meeting will be scheduled in time to take this up appropriately.
Mr. Kelly.
I just want to clarify, the audit committee was of the position that we need to get these reviews by New York. V's. That's what we needed to do. We also wanted to look at what the cost was of the cyber insurance to cover us on the indemnification. So the cost is a factor. But we didn't necessarily say cyber insurance was the way to go. We wanted to get cost. We wanted to get information on it. So that's fine. The law department could follow that up.
Fair enough. Okay. Any other comments or questions regarding some of the committee reports and special project team reports? My understanding that one that's not listed is the ad hoc committee.
That's correct.
So, Mr. Pellegrino?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, the ad hoc OPEB committee met this evening. There were 3 motions that were passed. The first motion was to, which was unanimous, all 3, for the OPEB actuarial report working group to be assigned to the Budget Committee. The second motion was for the USI database working group to be assigned to the HR Committee. And finally, based on the completion of what we've accomplished this year, and specifically, we now have a new investment policy in place. We've addressed the procedures for reporting and appointing members to the OPEB trust. And in accepting the 2 motions that we've made, we will have assigned the 2 remaining working groups to other established BET committees. Therefore, the final motion and recommendation that we have was to terminate the ad hoc committee based on the assumption that it has completed its assignment and it's time to move on.
Thank you, Mr. Pellegrino. I think this is the longest ad hoc committee in the history of the town, maybe barring some building committees, but those are meant to be there. This one was, I don't think, ever meant to be there as long as it was, but thank you for your work and for completing it. Is there a second to this motion to, I'm just going to take it as one motion, terminate the ad hoc committee or disband it, and then relay 2 of those issues to the Budget Committee and the HR Committee? Second by Mr. Norton. Mr. Kelly.
I just wanted to, the Music Auditorium Building Committee did not submit a report. We did get preliminary site plan approval 2 weeks ago. So our next step is we're going to the ZBA Zoning Board of Appeals on the variances, and we go to ARC, the Architectural Review Committee. We also have been doing value engineering over the last month, and we have a meeting with the Board of Education this Thursday with respect to that value engineering and where we stand on the budget and the educational specifications. And then we'll report back in July.
Thank you. Sticking with the OPEB ad hoc committee, however, there's a pending motion, but that's okay. We got it all. We'll just lump it all together. You were on a roll, so I figured I'd just let you go with it. As I jokingly told Mr. Pellegrino before we walked in here, there are no consolation prizes or gifts for this committee. But then again, it's been going on for so long, that was your gift.
Thank you.
All those in favor of disbanding the ad hoc committee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. 11-0-0. Okay. Further questions or comments on any of the reports, including the MISA report? Moving right along. Item 5 now comes before us, the Comptroller's report. Our Comptroller, Peter Mynarski.
Good evening. Following up with the Chairman Walko's comments about RFPs and doing them in a timely manner, Diversified Investment Advisors got wind that we were going to do an RFP and immediately dropped their annual administrative costs from $90,000 to $76,500 effective July 1st. The process requires us to have it complete. It's because it ties into the IRS regulations. It's on a calendar year basis. So the RFP process will be culminated effective December 31st. Following up with some other comments about the cyber liability policy, we're in the process of renewing all the insurance lines of credits, whether it be the liability, the auto, the property, and the other miscellaneous. So we are going to have a quote on the cyber liability policy. As part of the renewal process, in this case, it's a new policy. We're going to have a 11-page survey combination interview type document application that the information technology manager or director has to fill out. And even if the cost is prohibitive, we will get an assessment of where we have liability or potential liability in the information technology area. All of the policies are coordinated. We got the last one was Nathaniel Witherall 2 years ago. They used to lapse on March 31st. They all lapsed June 30th, and we'll have all of our quotes in this week, running into maybe next Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. And Franklin Company, the broker, will be giving a presentation to the BET Audit Committee in the July meeting. One more, in the area of the shared services RFP, going back to the RFPs, they've done all their field work, as noted in the Controller's report, and I will share with the BET a draft copy of the reports that they will disseminate before they develop a final report and a PowerPoint presentation, and they will be giving the PowerPoint presentation and the final report at the July BET meeting. And finally, before I turn it over to questions, if I could turn your attention to the back of the handout, there's 2 pages in the back, and they have to do with the false alarms and the small courts process. And I want to follow up on some questions that came from Mr. Simon and 1 or 2 others. I turn your attentions to the alarm, fines, registration, fees spreadsheet. This is the population of delinquents that we're looking at sending to the small claims court. And we've gone between sending all 17 and sending 5. We've got it up to the full 17. The reason I've included this in the handout was Larry had some comments about fire alarms versus police alarms, and I wanted to show you that when we go to small claims court, we go for all the delinquencies lumped together. The first one, you can see the deli has a combination of registration fees, police fees, and fire fees, so that when we go to court, we're going to ask for the $2,060 plus the $75 filing fee back. Of the 17 that we filed, we drew 17 checks. Number 17, the restaurant, they've been dissolved, so we've put a stop payment on the check. We won't be going to court with them, and we won't be recovering that $520. And number 7, as soon as they find out we were about to file with the small claims court, the car wash facility paid us the full $900. Hopefully, I made it clearer about how we're going to court. It's not fire delinquencies versus police delinquencies. They're all combined. And having said that, I'll answer any other questions in the Controller's report.
Mr. Simon.
So we have, I can ask my first selectman here, hundreds or thousands of false fire alarms. We have like 1,700 false fire alarms a year. Some large number. Do we charge people for false alarms?
We have.
It's unbelievable that we could only have $250 worth of unpaid.
We don't charge for the person first.
Okay, yeah, it's you don't charge for the first, you charge for the second, and they graduate. And we have budgeted.
People pay them.
We budgeted $350,000 this year. The year's not over. We are almost around $380,000 collected.
It's just a little surprising that you have like 3 people that haven't paid a false fire alarm in the entire town.
No. There's a couple of criteria here. First of all, they got to be old. They've got to be probably at least out of the fiscal year. They have to be at least a year old, and there's got to be multiple attempts to find out to try to collect them, and they've got to be under $5,000 because that's the limit at the small claims court.
So do we have another page of people that are more than $5,000?
Oh, no, we have dozens and dozens of pages. This is simply illustrative of what we're going to small claims court with.
But we have large claims.
No.
No, these are it.
These are it.
These are the
I
largest.
don't understand. Do we have large claims
No.
that are uncollected?
No.
No, these are it.
No, that's not the whole list.
That's not the whole list, right?
Here's the question I think that Mr. Simon's trying to ask. Is there anybody in the town that owes more than $2,060 relating to police fire registration fee claims that are more than 1 year old?
The answer is there's nobody that we're going after. I'm not aware of anybody that's over 2,000. That's not to say over the last 10 or 15 years they've gotten up to an amount that's higher than that and they were proven uncollectible. We've got hundreds and hundreds of people that are delinquent every year, every month. The report, which has hundreds of people that owe, gets updated every 2 weeks. And so there's a monthly report that shows this. This is simply the ones that have been persistently delinquent for more than a year that we've made many attempts to collect from and have had the opportunity to go to the appeals board.
That answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Further questions? Pay your police or fire fines. I am pleased to see that no one's on this list from the BET. I always dread when I see lists like this that. Moved by Mr. Norton. Second by Mrs. Tarkington. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 11-0-0. Thank you, Mr. Minarski. One last point I didn't make. We should expect the matrix presentation PowerPoint in July. We're still on track for that.
I just reported that. I'm going to send out the report in draft form for comments, similar to how we did it with HDG.
Right. No, I heard that part of your report.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure the timing of it was still set for the PowerPoint in July.
Yes.
Okay. Item 6 now comes before us, the treasurer's report. Moved by Mr. Norton. Second by Mr. Mason. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? 11-0-0. Item 7 now comes before us. Approval of BET meeting minutes for May 17th of 2010. Moved by Ms. Tarkington. Second by Mr. Simon. Discussion. I hope all of you are getting comments to Mr. Pellegrino when he sends them out on his first draft. And I suspect that as a result of no comments here tonight, that's being done and people are in acceptance of it. Okay.
And I do, in fact, get comments from a number of members of the board.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? 11-0-0. Item 8 now comes before us. Officers' report. I can safely say that the summer months, or at least so far through tonight's meeting, has not been what they call restful or the doldrums of summer. For those of you who attended the PTA Council dinner, there was a nice event that PTA sponsors or provides every year, and a chance for BET members to meet the incoming and outgoing PTA Council representatives and the various schools. And so that's an excellent opportunity to meet and understand the leaders of the school constituencies. Also, if you were able to go to the Griff Harris Golf Center dedication, that occurred also, I guess it was last week. I was unable to attend, but I heard that at least a couple BET members were there, so that's always nice to see, and I believe that's up and running now for any of you golfers out there. Throughout this month, I've had several conversations with Nathaniel Witherell, various constituencies dealing with Nathaniel Witherell on both their certificate of need as well as their tax credit issue. That issue, the tax credit issue, will take up a little bit later on in this evening. But I want to say that as a lot of work is being done over the past month or since our last meeting regarding Nathaniel Witherell, it is still, in my eyes, one of the greatest issues that face not only this board but the town over the next, say, 6 months or so. Nathaniel Witherell and the fire department plan, which I believe there's a group that's meeting with the first selectman on Wednesday, are probably the two most significant items that we're going to face over the next few months, together with the revaluation. So with that, Nathaniel Witherell has done a lot of work collectively and individual board members in meetings with the state, with representatives from Greenwich. And while nothing is coming forward to us tonight in terms of an application, you don't take that as an indication that moving parts aren't moving forward. And so we hope to see them whenever the certificate of need is presented by the state, and we're optimistic that is, I keep on saying any day, I'm staying away from that. Let's just say within the coming weeks, and I'll put an S at the end of that. And so with that, unless any of the other officers have any reports, we will move on to item 9, which under old business there are 2 applications. The first one, SE11, will not be proceeding tonight and will be presented us in July. And so the last item under old business is the discussion of Nathaniel Witherell tax credits. Okay? So let me roll right into that. Many of you, if not all of you, know that one of the potential financial vehicles that Nathaniel Witherell is exploring is the potential for a discussion regarding tax credits. This vehicle is extremely complicated, and one is that is deserving of our attention, inasmuch as it has a potential savings to the town of anywhere from $5 to $7 million, and that's after you take out the cost of actually utilizing this vehicle. As late as today, there were 2 meetings that were held, one with a larger group in the First Selectman's office, representatives of Nathaniel Witherell, your comptroller, town attorney, First Selectman, RTM representative, and BET representatives. That was an involved conversation that lasted at least an hour, hour and a half, and it involved attorneys from Washington, D.C. that we engaged to deal in these types of transactions, as well as what I consider our local counsel from Robinson and Cole. Suffice it to say that one of the major potential obstacles for this type of financing is the level of control that may or may not, depending on how you look at this, be lost as a result of this financing, or I should say just altered. That being said, we've decided to follow 2 or 3 tracks simultaneously at limited expense to the taxpayers through the Nathaniel Witherell Project Renew of money that has already been allocated. And that was as a result of not only the first meeting, but then a second meeting with the BET's special project team that reviewed this together with Lloyd Bankson, a member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board. And those 3 tracks are as follows. We anticipate that there may be some issues regarding not only the town charter, but any potential deed restrictions, as well as our negotiations with the state. So we've asked the town attorney to review all 3 of those areas, and to also be in communication with Nathaniel Witherell relative to the certificate of need, to ensure that this type of financing has the blessing of those 3 areas, or is not in conflict with either the deed restrictions, the town charter, or the certificate of need. We have also asked for council to provide us a list of 3 accountants that we can then engage to provide to us a risk-benefit analysis, so that we fully appreciate and understand what it's going to cost us to engage in this type of transaction, and then what is truly the benefit that we expect to get from this type of transaction. And then lastly, we have asked local counsel to provide us with a timeline. There have been a lot of comments about when and our deadline for when this can actually occur. By one estimate, we must have everything in place before December 31st. Another instance suggests that that deadline might be able to be extended. And then there's always the need for RTM approval to even be done before the December 31st deadline, which would then put the timeline at a sort of drop-dead date of around the Thanksgiving timeframe to make sure that it's on the RTM agenda. So we are trying a measured approach, one that affords the BET to gain a set of facts to make a decision to bring back before all of us, to then ultimately send over to the RTM. We think it's a reasoned approach, an approach that does not spend a lot of money. Obviously, we don't want to waste taxpayer money simply to go on some wild goose chase. At the same time, $5 to $7 million, as they would say, is real money. And we should explore it. We should explore it with the notion that if we can save the taxpayers of this town that amount of money, assuming Project Renew is approved, then it's I think, our obligation to do our due diligence, and that's what we're doing. I can't certainly speak for the whole board of the Nathaniel Witherell board, but at least in the meetings that we had, they seem to be in approval of this plan of action, or at least there were no objections. Let me put it in that fashion. So we hope to get this information in the next couple weeks. At least one estimate was that this accounting could be done in about 2 weeks' time. And so we plan on bringing this back in July, at least to the extent that it's feasible and Nathaniel Witherell still wishes to proceed in that fashion, and at least move this process along. Because I think at the end of the day, what we want to make sure of is that the BET or the administration is not holding this up, that we've done everything that we can to facilitate moving this forward, and that's our goal. So with that, I'll open it up to questions by the BET if you have it of me. Also, the chairman, Mr. Ormsby, if anything that I've said either you disagree with or you would like to comment on, please feel free to do so.
Well, I think that's a fair summary.
Thank you. Questions, and I know it's a lot to take in without the numbers or the documents in front of you. Let me just say that there were a lot of people in the room, and I think all of us, I've used conservatively that I think sort of 80% of what the attorneys were talking about was actually sunk in. But it will be a complex transaction and one that requires a great deal of scrutiny. But before we jump in headfirst, I think we're dipping our big toe, and we're trying to make sure that it's something that we want to do before we start spending a lot of money on either legal fees or transaction fees, I'll just say. So I'll be quiet now before I mess up what David said he was in agreement with. Okay, fair enough. So at the very least, you'll get an update in July. I'm hoping, because of the at least contemplated time frame, we're really looking to move this forward with either a sort of yes, let's move forward, or a no, it's not worth it type of vote in July. So be prepared in July to take this matter up. Okay. Item 10 now comes before us, new business, OPEB Trust Board resolutions. For that, I call on our Investment Committee Chairman, Mr. Norton, and before that, let me just, well, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 3+ years ago, when the BET decided to follow through on some Connecticut legislation that allowed the creation of a trust to handle our other post-employee liability benefits, we decided that what we wanted to have was a investment advisory committee to the OPEB trust that would be made up of non-BET members, and that would also be professionals within the industry. And they, as we identify, there would be civilians who participate in the investment world. One of the first steps we had to do with that was to have the OPEB ad hoc committee go through its life and existence, and finally, a few minutes ago, that was dissolved. We have now come to the point in which, as of this meeting, we'll be recommending that the OPEB trust be made up of 3 individuals who combined have at least 120 years in the investment advisory business on all sides of it, on the equity side, on the fixed income side, on the money management side, as well as the various other elements of the investment industry. And I think that we have put together what is an outstanding board member, 3 members to serve on this board as our investment advisors. And at the meetings of the Investment Advisory Committee, first on June 3rd, we interviewed William Ferdinand, who's we've included the resumes for both individuals who we are recommending tonight. We interviewed Mr. Ferdinand for a position on the OPEB Trust for a period to end June 30, 2011, in effect succeeding the final member of the BET who served on that committee. On the 14th of June, we interviewed Mr. Robert Stricker, who's currently serving as a member of the OPEB Trust and wants to be reappointed to that board to serve a term ending June 30th, 2013. Our vote on both of these individuals was 4-0, and we recommend to the full BET that these 2 individuals join the OPEB Trust Board as of July 1st this year. We have further resolved at our June 14th meeting to recommend that the chairman for the term ending June 30th, 2011 of the OPEB Trust Board be Mr. Robert Stricker. And the Investment Advisory Committee so moves, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Raymer.
Both individuals, Mr. Ferdinand and Mr. Stricker, are sitting in the back of the room. I think they've been introduced to all members of this board.
Discussion on this item. Let me say that I am thrilled that Mr. Stricker is again seeking a term on this board. So thank you, and thank you for being here tonight. And I am equally thrilled that Mr. Ferdinand has agreed to accept this position as well. I think this is sort of the Justice League of all boards of the town. I mean, this is top notch, and I think this is truly reflective of the amount of dedication and professional acumen that we have in this town through our citizenry. I don't think we could have asked for 3 finer people, with Phil Skidmore also rounding out the board. And so to the 2 of you here, and to Mr. Skidmore, thank you for serving. This is a truly unique time for this OPEB trust. It's really the first time that it's the board or the trust going out on its own without any BET representative. And I think this is the structure that we envisioned when we first created this trust, and I think you will serve the citizens well. So I couldn't be more happy in endorsing what the investment committee has done. Further discussion. All right, we're going to take them all up at once unless somebody wants to separate them. We'll take up the resolution that appoints Mr. Ferdinand to June 30th of 2011, Mr. Stricker to June 30th of 2013, and the appointment of Mr. Stricker until June 30th, 2011.
As chairman.
As chairman. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. 11-0-0. Again, thank you, gentlemen.
Congratulations.
Is there any other new business to come before us?
Mr. Chairman, before we leave this item, on behalf of the Investment Advisory Committee, I want to thank our 2 representatives from the OPEB Trust who have joined us this evening, and thank the board for their support.
Any further business? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.